Jewish tradition understands the power of sound. Does anybody know the first sound in the Torah? The first sound in the Torah is God's voice. Yehi Or, that of the divine speech. God bringing out from nothingness being. Speech, sound, was a generative force, a sign of God's presence. We remember this in our daily liturgy. I mentioned it earlier. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Blessed is the one who spoke and brought the world into being. At the risk of exposing myself fully as a nerd, if I did not do so already on Rosh Hashanah, are there any Tolkien fans out there? All right, you know. Now, please, stay with me. J.R.R. Tolkien, some of you may have read The Hobbit at some point, I hope. Maybe The Lord of the Rings. All right, stick with me. Tolkien was a scholar of Norse literature and a professor of English literature at Oxford University who happened to become famous for his fiction. The story of his fiction is actually somewhat disturbing, as he began writing it while serving in the trenches of France in World War I, writing his first works on a series of postcards sent home, longing for something green that was not ground into mud, for a world that was not made of metal and explosives. It grew from there, of course, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, from a creation and a sweeping epic that leads to the later days. Now, his story of creation in the Silmarillion grapples also with what went wrong. How can humanity occupy a world with conflict, with death, and with such sorrow? Tolkien's creation myth, too, begins with the generative power of sound, particularly that of music. Listen. As he tells it, there was Eru, the one who in Arda, earth, they call Iluvatar. And he made the first holy ones that were the offspring of divine thought, and they were with him before anything else was made, and he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music. And they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but a few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only one small part of the mind of God from which he had come. And in the understanding of each other they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding and increased in unison and harmony, until finally it came that they were all called together. A mighty theme was declared to them, unfolding a vision of things greater and more wonderful than yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, effectively the angels, so that they bowed low before God and were silent. And God said to them, of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that you make in harmony together a great music. Right? And through that, they create the world, weaving together in harmony. Now, when I first read this work in my teens, and I've returned to it several times, it always made sense to me. Certainly, as part of Jewish tradition, what do the angels in heaven do every day from sunrise to sundown? They sing in Jewish tradition. They sing before God. They make heavenly music. And so it made sense to me on another level, not just from that of connection to Torah, but because of the effect of music. The effect that music has over me, my mind, and my body. Now, I've never been much of a dancer. I'm sorry, Bettina. But my pulse and my breathing change with music. It grabs my physical being. I don't know if any of you wear any kind of a watch that monitors your pulse. I don't want a grandstand, but I have a pretty low resting pulse. When I'm listening to music, I can pick up my wrist and my heartbeat could easily be at 100 or 110 beats per minute, depending on what's playing. My thoughts, my emotions respond so greatly that I am moved to laughter, to tears, and everything in between because my imagination is triggered and runs free with music. I saw many of you with tears in your eyes earlier this evening as music was being performed, played, transmitted, connected to you, reaching a place of you that nothing else does. And so I have long intuited that there was something more to music than simple vibrations in the air. My main sources of music as a child were my parents' taste, and I'm sure that was the same for many of you, plus what I learned at school, and of course, what I learned going to synagogue growing up. So at home, that meant almost exclusively orchestral music, and for the most part, accepted canonical works from the Baroque through the Romantic periods. I can't remember any popular music being played, unless maybe it was, popular music from the teens. And most jazz was not on the menu. Now, unlike today, I was a pretty hyper kid. Had my childhood occurred in these years, I probably would have been medicated and made to sit still. I wish that were not so. Thank God my parents realized that they could put a record on the turntable. Oh, do you remember that? So wonderful. And I would lie on the floor, listen, and daydream, easily for the best part of an hour, both sides of the LP. Didn't matter. Peter and the Wolf, Beethoven, it primed my imagination. At its best, music is an amazing medium that simply carried me away to almost a different dimension. I cannot ignore it. For me, there is no such thing as background music. Bettina, you can be my witness. If I'm sitting in a crowded room and I'm talking to people at the table, I'm already compiling a list of the last 3 songs that just played on the stereo or in the background in the restaurant or the bar. I can't ignore it. My own tastes, now they did expand from where I started, as you might guess. I remember at one point a Simon and Garfunkel record appeared in the house. Maybe it was my sister who had bought it. It was quickly assimilated. I had a small radio in my bedroom. Oh boy. In the words of the late Lou Reed, founding member of the Velvet Underground and another Jewish kid from Long Island. Now, Jenny said when she was just about 5 years old, hey, there's nothing happening at all. Not at all. Every time I put on the radio, there's nothing going down at all. Not at all. But one fine morning, she hears a New York station. She doesn't believe what she heard at all. She started dancing to that fine, fine music. Her life was saved by rock and roll. Oh, despite all the computation, you could just dance to a rock and roll station. And it was all right. I was off to the races. The New York radio dial of my youth was a place of unlimited riches. Beatles, Pink Floyd, King Crimson, Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Carlos Santana, Frank Zappa, Jimi Hendrix. You could hear it all on 1 or 2 stations. The variety of music available was just astounding, and I effectively studied and learned. I see a fellow a Long Islander longing for the old days of WNEW and WPLJ, right? Long gone. But what I also noticed is it didn't take long before I was mostly looking backwards at music, and I had little interest in pop music after the age of 12 or 13. I think Michael Jackson's Thriller is the last pop album I heard. As I grew older, I began to think about music in a different way, and this is where I want to take you. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. The elements of rhythm, melody, and harmony are essential to our humanity and to our spiritual well-being. Everybody, everywhere is connected to it. From before we are born, we are exposed to music. In the womb, we have our own heartbeats and the heartbeats of our mothers. We're already experiencing a polyrhythm. When we leave that womb, we draw breath and add another beat to it against our hearts. When we learn to walk, the rhythm of our footsteps against our breath and our heart. We are programmed for rhythm. For many of us, a house of worship is where we are most likely to encounter live music, or even better, sing it out loud with other people. On Kol Nidre, this evening named for the music we hear. How much the more so? We recognize that our souls can actually bind together through the experience of shared music, both as performers and as listeners. Varying religious traditions approach the divine differently. There are those that seek to make us feel small before the unreachable grandeur of God. People must strive to rise up and reach for the holy. Think of a historic cathedral in Europe and how it looks. The vault of the ceiling, the massive pipe organ, the choir perhaps in a loft up above. It's all meant to pull us up from the floor towards the heavens. It's an architecture of longing for what we cannot reach. Some encourage monastic behavior and solitary meditation and chant as a path to the divine, an individual pursuit necessarily apart from others. Some look through music and song to call the divine to visit us and take up residence. If you have ever been in a drum circle of any kind, you know what I am speaking of. There are whole areas of human expression meant to bring the divine down amongst us. When I was in seminary, many years ago already, a thesis was required of all the fifth-year rabbinic students. My idea at the time was to examine the prophetic call. How is it that God communicated to the biblical prophets, and why was it always through sound and voice? I had a few thoughts that were nagging at me back then. I thought, well, maybe dolphins could help us. Why dolphins? Well, because dolphins communicate and perceive the world through the same sense, echolocation. Effectively, they see, get a picture back of what they see, and then reproduce that call for another dolphin, beaming what they have seen to another creature. For us, music and speech, that is the sound that does that. That is the sense that does that. How is it that an alarm clock works? Why do we hear it when we're still asleep? There's a part of us that's primed for the call. Hearing is a direct line to a deeper part of consciousness. And of course, Beethoven never really went away from me, and he's always kept a special place for me and remains my gold standard for European classical melody and expression. As I learned outside of my childhood, he was known as an iterative composer, tweaking things as he went along, laboring over it, but he was also restless, uncontained by convention and constraints, expanding the orchestra as necessary to get the sounds into the ears of the listeners that he had brought into being. Even more, his works grew deeper as his own hearing failed, and I'm sure many of you know this. He was losing his hearing, and his music grew more profound. How could a person unable to hear their own work continue to write it? In the Heiligenstadt Testament of 1802, Beethoven wrote at the age of 28 a letter to his brothers against his hopeless deafness and of being robbed of human company in his art. He said, "I was compelled early to isolate myself, to live in loneliness. When I at times tried to forget all this, oh, how harshly was I repulsed by the doubly sad experience of my bad hearing, and yet it was impossible for me to say to men, 'Speak loud or shout, for I am deaf.' How could I possibly admit such an infirmity in the one sense which should have been more perfect in me than in others? a sense which I once possessed in highest perfection, a perfection such as few surely in my profession enjoy or have enjoyed. Beethoven goes on to tell us that he stayed his urge to end his own life and labored on with an encroaching and a finally complete deafness for one single reason. What a humiliation when one stood beside me as he was out in the country and heard a flute in the distance, and I heard nothing. Or someone heard the shepherd singing, and again I heard nothing. Such incidents brought me to the verge of despair, but little more, and I would have put an end to my life. Only art it was that withheld me. It seemed impossible to leave the world until I had produced all that I felt called upon me to produce. And so I endured this wretched existence. And in the years ahead, indeed, Beethoven's output slowed, but its quality only grew. His sense of hearing when it came to music, it seems, had little to nothing to do with his actual ears. And so I thought, maybe this all ties together to explain human prophecy, the very human receptiveness to God. It's a deep hearing within us that's not dependent on our physical senses, all activated by our inborn musical affinity and capacity. This is why God's word is pronounced by the prophets with Ko Amar Adonai, thus says the Eternal. So was God's utterance communicated to me as deeply as if I heard it personally. Well, my thesis advisor told me that my idea was more suited to a series of books, not a thesis, and it was a dead end. I changed direction, but the thoughts never left me alone, and I am as convinced today as I was 26 or 27 years ago, because everywhere people live, we make and take in music. It binds us together. It speaks directly from one soul to another as no other of our arts can. And I believe with all of my heart that in its highest expressions, music points us towards its ultimate source. We memorialize the greatest instances of music as worthy of preservation and recording. We listen to them again and again to enable ourselves to feel what we felt when we first heard it. We are evolved and neurologically gifted by our Creator to experience sound on literal and symbolic levels and charged to respond in kind. As we read in the Torah, in chapter 20 of Exodus, all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning, the blare of the horn and the mountain smoking. Chol ha'am ro'im et ha'kolot. All of the people saw the sound. They saw the thunder. The ancient rabbis commented on this. They saw the sounds. What could that possibly mean? What it means is that they saw that which should be heard, something which is impossible to see on any other occasion. Again, the magic of God's voice. As we have in Psalm 96, sing to the Eternal, bless the divine name, proclaim God's salvation day after day. Tell of God's glory among the nations, God's wonder among all the peoples, for the Eternal is great and much acclaimed. God is held in awe by all the divine beings. Sing. You sing and you sing before God. Every time you open your mouth in song, you sing before God. The final shattering of the symphonic form from Beethoven, famously the Ninth Symphony. He had already expanded the orchestra to include more brass and percussion than it had ever known before. And then he violated the form again by including a chorale at the end. And I'm sure all of you have heard it. But what were the words that he chose to put to that incredible music? Freude schöne Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium, wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlische dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt. Joy, you beautiful divine sparks of joy. daughter of paradise. Fire-drunken, we are entering heavenly, your sacred space. Your magic binds us together. What strict custom divided, all people become brothers where your gentle wings abide. Be embraced, you millions. Take this kiss throughout the world. Brothers and sisters, over the tent of stars must reside a beloved Father. What was Beethoven's joy, if not his art? His music that kept him attached to life, the beautiful spark that points towards what lies beyond the tent of stars. We are here for Kol Nidre. At the beginning of our worship, we heard one of the oldest melodies in our tradition, medieval in origin, played so beautifully by Larry, who's gone back. There you are. By Larry Chaplin, sung so beautifully by Mark Howard and Jennifer Antebbe. It pulls at us. The ingenuity of humanity to form instruments and master them. The human voice powered by the breath, the neshama breathed into us by God, speaking back before God, singing a new song before God. For me, and I hope for you after this, music is a form of experiential proof for God's power in our lives. We all know the power of music in our lives and what it can do, what it can make us feel, to delight us, to lift us up, to transcend our moment and our physical beings, our pulse, our breath, our brainwaves aligning with the people around us hearing it. I believe it is a gift from the God who made us, to empower us to reach back, sharing in some small way with the same creative forces that gave rise to us, sound. It's a gift that enables us to form harmony with all that lives, giving us both inspiration and hope for an eventual resolution of all the discord that we know in our troubled world. As the E.E. Cummings poem that is quoted in part one of our Sidurim says, how should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of all nothing, human merely being, doubt unimaginably you? Now the ears of my ears awake. Now the eyes of my eyes are opened. I pray for all of us that the ears of our ears are indeed awake, that we revel in the gift that we have been given as human beings, to make music with each other, which inevitably draws us back towards its source.